This is going to be my video review of the comparison between the Saddleback Classic Briefcase in dark coffee brown, the large size, against the Texbo Real Thick Cowhide Leather Men's Shoulder Briefcase Fit 17-inch laptop bag tote. As you, I am sure, of aware, if you've watched my other videos, this current Saddleback bag we have over here is in the process of being returned to Saddleback and likely getting replaced, while this Texbo bag over here is my old Texbo bag that's seen about 2 years of continuous usage. I was originally going to wait until I got a new Saddleback and a new Texbo bag to do a head-to-head comparison, but given that I'm going to be losing my Saddleback for a while, and it may be a little while before I then buy the Texbo that I'm going to use as a gift, I figured a head-to-head comparison between the old Texbo versus the kind of, but not really old Saddleback is appropriate. It's going to be the first part of the video series, and I'm just going to walk all of you through bit by bit each individual part of the bag, and we'll just do head-to-head comparisons of the individual pieces. So the first piece that we will start off with will be a comparison of the shoulder pads, because I have the bags deconstructed to some degree to make it much easier to do this head-to-head comparison. So we have the two pieces, which is first the shoulder pad of the Saddleback, and second the shoulder pad of the Texbo. Now this one is 2 years old, while this one has been used for about 2 months. So obviously it's not a completely fair comparison, but I think it gives you an idea of the difference between the two products. So if we just hold it side by side here, you can see they are both made of leather. However, one is clearly thicker than the other. Now, the difference in thickness is not huge in the leather. However, the difference in how soft and tough it is different. This is actually very, very tough to bend and takes a while to kind of get used to and conform. And it's starting to, after 2 months of usage, conform to my shoulder. You can see some of those bends in the leather starting to appear. However, if you look, if I hold it like this, it is still very much a very solid, hard piece of leather. Now, by comparison, if I were to hold the Texbo one up, you can see it's actually very soft and easy to fold. And this bag, starting on day one, conformed to my shoulder extremely nicely. In terms of stitching, both do a great job of stitching and holding together. The Saddleback, I suspect, also contains some soft foam-like material in here, while the Texbo does not and is just plain leather. Comfort-wise, fairly similar, not a huge difference. You can tell a little bit that the Saddleback has a bit more of a foam covering to it that doesn't exist in the Texbo, but in day-to-day use, it's really not all that apparent. Quality of leather is going to be hard to compare given that they're different age, but you can see the Texbo has kind of gotten this nice patina to it, and this is probably more what it looked like when I first got it. So that comparison is pretty stark between the two. Now, moving on to the other parts of the strap. So if we talk about the main part of the strap here, this here is the Saddleback, and you can see it comes with a myriad of holes to kind of pick and choose where you want to plug in your strap to extend it to. While at the end here, it has a very, very nice and solid clip. And it's held together extremely nicely by 2 rivets with the head that spins fairly freely. It is also substantial and hefty and made of the same type of leather that the bag is made out of, with great stitching. You can see after about 2 months of usage, you can start to see a little bit of creasing of where I usually leave the strap at. However, it has held up very nicely in this period. This here is the strap from the Texbo. Now, I've actually altered the strap because I was not actually originally planning on reviewing all of these parts. So what I actually did was take the lobster claw off of one end and put it onto the end of the strap and did my own rivets to make this a leather belt that I could use. So that is why this is on the end here. However, if you look at this leather, it has really started to age and come into its own. Really beautiful. Right down here is where I usually had belted it, and stitching has also done extremely well as well. This leather has also held up and also has a bunch of holes for you to use to strap things to. It is also double riveted. This is not the original rivets it came with. These are the rivets I placed myself. One of the differences in the strap was the flexible movable leather strap to hold the tongue in place rather than the fixed strap that you find in the Saddleback. Now, as for the ends that are connected to, you can see here, this is one of the ends it was connected to, and it has a nice little lobster claw clip here that can clip onto things. I can say this doesn't work as smoothly. It is 2 years old, but even on day one, definitely not as smooth action as you get from the Saddleback, which is a very smooth action, and probably just a difference in terms of cost of materials here, but both fairly solid. This one from the Saddleback, a little bit heavier than this one that came with the Texbo. Now for the Texbo rivets, these are the original rivets, and this is how it looks, and it's held up well. These are the rivets of the Saddleback, which you can see here, a little bit of a darker color to it. Complements the leather, I think, a little bit better. As other people have talked about, this is that fixed second strap where the tongue can go through. If you aren't a tall person and the tongue is very, very long on this particular strap, this is not flexible or movable, which means that you'll have to find another solution. Some people have used twine, other people have used the cable holders that Saddleback makes to kind of hold these in place. These individual pieces and Saddleback, like the top, held up really well. What I actually use this piece for is I actually took both lobster claws and took away, removed 2 rivets here where the original belt clip was. You can see the hole for that little metal piece that goes through, and put a lobster claw here. And the idea being I can hook this onto the 2 D-rings on the side of the Saddleback and use this to hold onto my luggage while I'm moving the bags around. They do actually sell these online. They're about $50 or $60 each. I figured since I had an old bag that I was essentially retiring, I wouldn't need it anymore. So I made these tiny little adjustments to it. All right, now moving on, I think the next most logical step is comparing the hardware of the 2 bags. So this time we'll start with the Texbo and just kind of compare the differences between this and the Saddleback. So rather than a solid O-ring, this one has kind of a modified D-ring with a very large loop here for backpack mode. It has a handle that is not filled with anything, so has a little bit more give, held on by O-rings here. And on the side, many more D-rings, which over 2 years have done extremely well and really haven't run into any issues with in terms of strength of material and how well it's held on. These rivets also have held up extremely nicely, and this D-ring has held on very well too. Bottom D-rings, as I said in my other reviews, I haven't used as much, but otherwise has done very, very well. Compare this to the Saddleback over here, and the Saddleback uses a much more substantial O-ring on the back here to hold it on. On the side here, also uses far more substantial D-rings. Though they are all made of metal, the heft of these rings, just from moving them back and forth, you can tell are probably a little bit heavier than the materials that Texbo uses, and it's probably a higher grade source material than what you find on the Texbo. However, the other rings have survived daily usage over 2 years and have never had an issue. So, you know, you can use that information however you want. Saddleback uses a different kind of securing system. They have one rivet here holding that leather strap and kind of keeping it nice and wide, while secondary rivet over here holds this strap in place. and it is these two rivets that secure this piece of leather in place. Bottom, again, D-rings. One interesting thing about Saddleback as compared to the Texbo is they actually use multiple sizes of D-rings. I think depending on what they're used for. If you can kind of look here, this front D-ring compared to this back D-ring are actually two different sizes. This back one is larger and this front one is smaller. It's actually also the same on the bottom. The front D-ring here compared to this back D-ring are two very slightly different sizes, and I think the front one is a little bit smaller than the back one. Overall, I would say in terms of quality of materials, quality of rivets, you know, the type of metal being used here, Saddleback definitely wins this round. However, this bag has survived daily usage, you know, everywhere from airports to cars to just being thrown around. Since this is a far more affordable bag, I'm probably much rougher on it than I ever will be with my Saddleback, and have never run into any problems. All right, let's talk about the external belts here. Now, both the Texbo as well as the Saddleback have full-length leather belts that run the whole course of the bag. So this time around, we'll start with the Saddleback. These bags are held on by these kind of leather loops. The way Saddleback has these loops designed, the leather runs through it extremely smoothly, and it loops back around very, very easily. This leather is very, very tough, and literally the same leather that the strap is made of, but just a shorter length. The bottom here, the hook that secures it, I've honestly never actually used this, and I never really used it on my Texbo either, but it looks nice, and also made of the exact same belt hook material that you found on the shoulder straps as well. So no loss in quality, even though this may be a belt that's not utilized as often. The bottom of this belt here, if I can get this up, is secured by two rivets. Looking at the Saddleback, their bags have the exact same leather straps in the exact same places. However, these straps are actually smaller than Saddleback straps, meaning that it's actually a bit of a chore trying to get this leather underneath, and I always have to wiggle it and pull. And once it's set, however, it does not move at all. These straps are not used very much, but the same quality material as makes the shoulder straps, which is extremely high quality in the Texbo, and also run all the way to the bottom. You can see here, this is the pieces that always hit the ground, and these have done really well, no issues, and have held up extremely well. The top buckle here also has held up really well. This has been used a couple times, but really no other changes. And over time, if you look, due to my lack of usage, it just naturally kind of hangs in this position. It uses a single rivet as opposed to a double rivet that you see in the Saddleback bag, but has really developed a really, really nice color and patina to this leather strap. And one very interesting thing is, if I take the strap of the shoulder strap that is easily used much, much more often, and we put it right there next to the belt strap, you can see the difference in color just from usage. Those two straps started out the exact same color and were literally, you know, twins in terms of quality, look, thickness, stitching, and one has changed significantly more than the other. You can see in the higher loading areas, this leather has stretched a little bit and the color has changed. While in the lower loading areas, you know, because the buckle was here, this piece of leather wasn't pulled as much. It's actually much closer in color to the original strap. The outer tongue on the bag has also held up extremely nicely. The Saddleback one is secured by two rivets on the outside, very reminiscent of the original Saddleback classic briefcase, and has the tongue here with only 3 different sizes. The Saddleback has a far more variation in sizes, so you could secure it at multiple levels. That does not exist on the Texbo. On the bottom, this piece where it straps into is sewn on as a single leather strap, and really not actually held on by anything else. There's no rivets. This is not torn. There have been no issues. You can see the stitching has actually also held up extremely nicely. So though likely not as over-engineered as Saddleback's is, has actually stood the test of time as of 2 years. Only time will tell what happens further on. Now, the Saddleback bag, this tongue has far more holes in it. You can see they basically started all the way at the bottom, went all the way up to the top. So you have a bunch of choices in terms of where you want to secure this bag. This bottom piece here, this hook is secured on by a rivet as opposed to only stitching and doesn't extend all the way to the bottom. It has a nice big loop here that you can loop it through. And this one, very over-engineered, definitely way more engineered than the Texbo is. Whether or not it needs to be, I'll leave it up to you, the viewer, to decide. The final comparison we're going to make is the external leather between these two bags. Now, though this Texbo bag is 2 years old, this leather was always softer and always a lot more floppy than this Saddleback was, even when comparing new to new. The Saddleback is a lot thicker and kind of holds its shape a little bit better. Very clearly, this is likely a function of the choices in terms of how they dye the leather, how they source the leather, and clearly given the difference in cost and kind of how it feels differently. Saddleback leather, higher quality than the leather on the Texbo. The Texbo leather has also done extremely, extremely well. All right, and stay tuned for the next part of this video series where we'll go a little bit more in depth into the difference between the pockets and the interiors of the bag. And then there'll likely be a final video comparing kind of final conclusions and thoughts.